In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where stars twinkled like diamonds scattered across an endless black canvas, there existed a planet unlike any other. Its name was Zyrithia, a world bathed in hues of violet and gold, where crystalline forests shimmered under twin suns that painted the skies with perpetual twilight. The inhabitants of this wondrous place were not mere beings but warriors forged by centuries of survival against cosmic threats. Among them stood their fiercest protector, Arathian, the alien warrior princess. Arathian was no ordinary royal. Her presence commanded awe as much as fear. Clad in armor made from the iridescent scales of ancient space serpents, she moved with grace and power unmatched by anyone on her planet. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the energy coursing through her veins, an inheritance from ancestors who had once touched the heart of a dying star. She was tall, her form both elegant and imposing, her skin shimmering faintly like liquid silver. Yet for all her strength and majesty, Arathian carried within her something unfamiliar to most of her kind: curiosity about life beyond Zyrithia's borders. It began one fateful day when the sky above their kingdom erupted into chaos. A strange vessel descended from the heavens, trailing smoke and fire as it plummeted toward the crystal plains below. Warriors rushed to investigate, weapons drawn, expecting yet another invasion or threat. But what they found instead defied every expectation. Inside the wrecked ship lay a lone survivor, a human man. He was unlike anything they had ever seen before. His skin was soft and pale compared to theirs, his frame smaller yet somehow resilient despite the injuries he sustained. When Arathian approached him, kneeling beside his broken body, she felt a stirring inside herself, a mix of confusion and intrigue. He looked up at her through half-closed eyes, blood streaking his face, and whispered hoarsely, "Why do you call me beautiful?" The words stunned her. Beautiful. It was a concept foreign to her people, whose lives revolved around duty, honor, and battle. They did not waste time on such frivolous notions. And yet, here was this fragile creature speaking of beauty while staring death in the face. For reasons she couldn't explain, Arathian decided then and there that this human would live, even if only so she could understand why he spoke those peculiar words. Days passed, and the human slowly recovered under careful supervision. His name, he told them, was Kale. He came from a distant blue-green world called Earth, though none of the Zyrithians recognized its location among the stars. Kale proved to be surprisingly resourceful despite his physical frailty. He mended quickly, thanks to advanced healing techniques administered by the royal healers, and soon began exploring the palace grounds, marveling at everything he saw. To Arathian, watching him navigate her world was both amusing and puzzling. Everything seemed new and wondrous to him. The way the crystals sang softly when touched by sunlight, the luminescent rivers that flowed like liquid light, even the towering spires of the palace itself. She followed him often, observing silently as he reached out to touch things with childlike wonder. Each time he turned to look at her, his gaze lingered longer than necessary, filled with emotions she didn't fully comprehend. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Kale stopped abruptly during one of his walks. Turning to face her, he said quietly, "You've been watching me." "I am responsible for your safety," Arathian replied coolly, though her glowing eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "It is my duty." Kale smiled faintly. "Is that all? Or are you curious too?" Her brow furrowed. "Curious about what?" "About me. About humans." He gestured vaguely toward himself. "About why I said what I did back in the wreckage." For a moment, Arathian hesitated. Then, stepping closer, she crossed her arms over her chest. "Explain yourself, human. Why did you speak of beauty when you should have been focused on survival?" Kale tilted his head, studying her intently. "Because I meant it. You saved me, even though I'm nothing special. To you, I must seem weak, insignificant. Yet you still chose to help me. That's beautiful." Arathian stiffened, unsure how to respond. Such ideas clashed violently with everything she knew. Strength defined worth. Beauty held no value in war. Still, his words lingered in her mind long after they parted ways that night. As weeks turned into months, Kale became more integrated into Zyrithian society, or as much as an outsider could. Despite initial resistance from some members of the court, many grew fond of him, charmed by his earnestness and willingness to learn. Even Arathian found herself seeking him out more frequently, drawn by questions she couldn't ignore. Their conversations ranged from trivial matters to profound ones. Kale taught her about Earth, its oceans teeming with life, its cultures rich with art and music, its people flawed yet endlessly hopeful. In turn, Arathian shared tales of Xyrithia's history, of battles fought and won, of sacrifices made for the greater good. Through these exchanges, she began to see glimpses of a perspective entirely alien to her own. One afternoon, as they walked along the edge of a glowing river, Kale suddenly asked, "Do you ever feel trapped, Arathian?" She stopped short, startled by the question. "Trapped? By what?" "By expectations," he said simply. "By the need to always be strong, to never show weakness. Don't you ever wish you could just let go?" Her jaw tightened. Weakness leads to failure. Failure leads to death. Not just for oneself, but for others. There is no room for letting go. Kale sighed, shaking his head. But isn't there more to life than fighting? More to being alive than surviving? His words struck a nerve, though she refused to admit it. Instead, she changed the subject, redirecting their conversation towards safer topics. Yet deep down, doubts began to gnaw at her resolve. Was her existence truly fulfilling, or merely a cycle of endless battles and fleeting victories? Tensions rose when news arrived of an impending attack. Scouts reported sightings of a rogue fleet approaching Xyrithia's borders, led by a ruthless conqueror known as Vraxen. Fear spread throughout the kingdom, but Arathian remained resolute. As the warrior princess, it fell upon her to lead her people into battle once again. Kale, however, reacted differently. Rather than retreating to safety as advised, he insisted on accompanying her. "I may not be a fighter like you," he argued, "but I can help. I have knowledge of technology, of strategy. Let me contribute." "You will stay behind," Arathian snapped, her voice sharp with authority. "This is not your fight. It is my fight." Kale shot back, surprising her with his vehemence. "Your world took me in, gave me a second chance at life. If I can protect it, even in a small way, then I owe it to you, and to myself." For a moment, they stared at each other, locked in silent conflict. Finally, Arathian relented, though reluctantly. "Very well. But you will follow my orders without question." "Understood." Kale nodded, determination blazing in his eyes. And so, alongside her elite guard, they prepared for the coming storm. The battlefield was chaos incarnate. Explosions lit up the sky as ships clashed overhead, raining destruction upon the ground below. Arathian fought valiantly, her blade cutting through enemies with precision honed over decades of combat. Beside her, Kale worked tirelessly to disable enemy vessels using makeshift tools crafted from scavenged parts. Together, they formed an unlikely duo, one fueled by raw power, the other by ingenuity. Despite their efforts, the tide began to turn against them. Vraxen himself descended onto the field, a monstrous figure clad in obsidian armor, wielding a weapon capable of tearing apart reality itself. With each swing, entire squads were obliterated, leaving devastation in his wake. Seeing her forces falter, Arathian charged forward, determined to confront the tyrant directly. Kale shouted after her, begging her to reconsider, but she ignored him. This was her duty, to face the greatest threat head-on, no matter the cost. Yet as she engaged Vraxen in a fierce duel, it became clear that brute strength alone would not be enough. Every blow she landed was met with overwhelming force, pushing her back step by step. Desperation clawed at her heart as she realized she might fail, not just herself, but everyone counting on her. And then, amidst the cacophony of battle, a voice cut through the noise. "Arathian!" Turning, she saw Kale sprinting toward her, holding aloft a device pulsating with unstable energy. "Use this!" he cried, throwing it to her. "It'll overload his weapon." Without hesitation, she caught the device and hurled it at Vraxen. The resulting explosion engulfed him, forcing him to retreat. Victory was theirs, but at a terrible price. When the dust settled, Arathian searched frantically for Kale, finding him collapsed nearby, gravely injured. Cradling his limp form in her arms, she felt something unfamiliar twist painfully inside her chest. Tears welled in her glowing eyes as she whispered, "Why did you risk your life for mine?" Kale managed a weak smile, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Because you're worth it," he murmured. "Because you're beautiful." Once again, the word resonated deeply, stirring emotions she had always suppressed. As medics rushed to tend to him, Arathian stood frozen, grappling with feelings she couldn't name. For the first time in her life, she questioned whether strength alone truly defined greatness, or if perhaps beauty held a power all its own. Back at the palace, as Kale recuperated once more, Arathian spent countless hours reflecting on the events that transpired. She wandered the halls late at night, unable to sleep, haunted by memories of the battle and the weight of Kale's words. Slowly, imperceptibly, her perspective began to shift. Meanwhile, Kale sensed the change in her demeanor. Though weakened by his injuries, he continued to engage her in conversation, probing gently at the walls she had built around herself. One evening, as they sat together beneath the stars, he asked softly, "What are you afraid of, Arathian?" "Afraid?" she echoed, her tone guarded. "I fear nothing." "That's not true," he countered. "You're afraid of being vulnerable, of letting others see you as anything less than invincible." Her silence confirmed his suspicion. After a long pause, she admitted quietly, "Vulnerability invites weakness. Weakness invites failure. And love." Kale pressed. "Does that invite weakness too?" "Love." The word hung heavy in the air, unspoken until now. Arathian looked away, struggling to reconcile the turmoil within her. Love was a concept she barely understood, let alone embraced. Yet the bond growing between her and Kale defied logic, transcending boundaries she had always believed immutable. Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the palace. Another threat loomed on the horizon, one far greater than Vraxen's fleet. This time, however, Arathian faced it with a newfound resolve, shaped by the lessons Kale had unknowingly taught her. Together, they prepared to confront whatever challenges awaited, united not by duty or obligation, but by something deeper. Something neither fully understood, but both were beginning to cherish. The new threat came not from a fleet of ships or an army of warriors, but from the very fabric of Xyrithia itself. The planet, long stable and thriving under its twin suns, began to show signs of instability. Cracks formed in the crystalline forests, rivers of light dimmed to near darkness, and tremors shook the ground with increasing frequency. The royal scientists scrambled to decipher what was happening, their instruments detecting anomalies that defied explanation. It seemed as though Xyrithia's core, the source of its energy and life, was unraveling. Arathian felt the weight of this crisis heavier than any battle she had faced before. This was not an enemy she could fight with her blade. It was something far more insidious, creeping into every corner of her world. For the first time, she questioned whether her strength would be enough, or if there was even a solution at all. Kale, still recovering from his injuries, refused to sit idly by. He pored over the data collected by the scientists, asking questions no one else thought to ask. "What if it's not just Xyrithia?" he suggested during one tense meeting. "What if whatever's causing this is affecting other planets too?" The room fell silent. No one had considered the possibility that their plight might extend beyond their borders. Arathian frowned, considering his words. "Even if that's true," she said finally, "it doesn't change our immediate problem. We need answers, and fast." Kale nodded, his expression grim. "Then we'll find them together." Their search for answers led them deep into the heart of Xyrithia, where ancient ruins whispered secrets of the planet's creation. Legend spoke of a sacred chamber hidden beneath the surface, accessible only to those deemed worthy by the spirits of the land. Arathian knew the stories well but had always dismissed them as myths. Now, however, desperation drove her to consider every option. With Kale by her side, they ventured into the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the palace, guided by cryptic symbols etched into the walls. The journey was perilous, fraught with collapsing passages and strange, shadowy creatures that seemed born of the planet's growing instability. Yet through each challenge, Kale proved invaluable. Not just because of his quick thinking, but because of the quiet determination he inspired in Arathian. When they finally reached the chamber, it surpassed anything either of them could have imagined. A massive dome of shimmering crystal stretched overhead, pulsating with colors that shifted like living fire. At its center stood a pedestal, upon which rested a glowing orb that radiated warmth and power. "This must be it," Kale murmured, awe evident in his voice. "The heart of Zyrithia." Arathian approached cautiously, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. As she drew closer to the orb, visions flooded her mind, images of Zyrithia's past, present, and future intertwined. She saw the planet thriving, then crumbling, then reborn anew. And amidst it all, she saw herself, not as the warrior princess, but as something more. "It's showing me possibilities," she said haltingly, turning to Kale. "Choices I can make. Paths I can take. What does it mean?" Kale asked, stepping closer. Before she could answer, the ground beneath them trembled violently. The orb flared brightly, casting sharp shadows across the chamber. From the depths of the crystal dome emerged a being unlike any they had encountered before, a towering figure composed entirely of light and energy, its form shifting constantly. "You seek salvation for your world," the entity intoned, its voice resonating like thunder. "But salvation comes at a cost." Arathian straightened, meeting the being's gaze without flinching. "Name your price." "The imbalance consuming Zyrithia stems from a greater force threatening the galaxy," the entity explained. "To heal your world, you must confront this force directly. Alone." "No," Kale interjected firmly. "If this is about saving lives, then we face it together." The entity regarded him curiously, tilting its head. "Your bond is strong, human. But such unity may not withstand what lies ahead." "I don't care," Kale shot back. "I'm not leaving her side." For a moment, the chamber grew eerily silent. Then the entity turned back to Arathian. "The choice is yours, warrior princess. Will you embrace the path of solitude, or will you trust in the fragile connection you share with this mortal?" Arathian hesitated, torn between duty and desire. Every instinct screamed at her to go alone, to shield Kale from harm as she had always shielded others. But looking into his unwavering eyes, she realized she couldn't bear to sever the bond they had forged. Slowly, she reached out and took his hand. "We face it together," she declared, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. The entity nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Very well. But know this, the trials ahead will test you in ways you cannot yet comprehend. Fail, and both your worlds will perish." As the entity vanished, the orb dimmed, leaving behind only a faint glow. Arathian exhaled shakily, feeling the enormity of what lay ahead settle heavily on her shoulders. Beside her, Kale squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We've got this," he said softly. "Whatever happens, we'll face it, together." Their next destination was revealed in fragments gleaned from the orb's lingering echoes. They were to travel to a distant nebula known as the Veil of Eternity, a place shrouded in mystery and danger. Ancient texts described it as a nexus of cosmic forces, where realities converged and fractured. It was there, the entity had hinted, that the source of the imbalance could be found, and confronted. Preparing for the journey required sacrifices. Supplies were scarce, and many of Arathian's people urged her to stay behind, arguing that risking her life would leave Zyrithia leaderless. But Arathian refused to abandon her mission, knowing that failure meant the end of everything she held dear. Kale, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to modify their ship, reinforcing it against the unknown perils of the Veil. His ingenuity amazed even the most skeptical members of the Royal Engineers, earning him reluctant respect. Still, doubts lingered among the crew assigned to accompany them. Could a human truly endure the rigors of such a voyage? On the eve of their departure, Arathian sought solitude in the palace gardens, staring up at the twin suns that had illuminated her world for centuries. She wondered if she would ever see them again, or if her decision to bring Kale along would prove to be a fatal mistake. "You're worried," a familiar voice said behind her. She turned to find Kale standing there, his hands shoved into his pockets. "It's written all over your face." "I should have left you here," she admitted quietly. You deserve a chance at safety, not whatever awaits us out there. Kale stepped closer, his expression softening. And I told you, I'm not letting you do this alone. Besides, who else is going to remind you to stop being so stubborn all the time? Despite herself, Arathian chuckled. You are infuriatingly persistent. Yeah, well, someone's got to keep you grounded. He paused, his tone turning serious. Look, I know this isn't easy for you. Trusting me, trusting anyone, it goes against everything you've been taught. But maybe it's okay to let someone in. Just once. Her throat tightened as she looked at him, seeing not just the human man who had crashed onto her world, but the partner who had become her anchor in the chaos. Perhaps, she murmured. But if anything happens to you, I'll be fine, he interrupted, smiling gently. We'll both be fine. Because we're doing this together, remember? Together. The word echoed in her mind, carrying with it a promise neither of them fully understood, but one they were willing to stake their lives on. The voyage to the Veil of Eternity tested them in ways neither could have anticipated. Space itself seemed alive within the nebula, twisting and contorting around their ship like a living thing. Strange phenomena plagued their journey. Temporal distortions that slowed time to a crawl, gravity wells that threatened to crush them, and ghostly apparitions that whispered haunting truths. Through it all, Arathian and Kale relied on each other more than ever. When fear gripped her heart, Kale's calm presence steadied her. When doubt clouded his mind, her unwavering resolve bolstered him. Together, they navigated the treacherous expanse, inching closer to their goal. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they arrived at the heart of the veil, a swirling vortex of light and shadow, pulsating with raw energy. At its center floated a crystalline structure, ancient and immense, radiating waves of power that made their skin tingle. That's it, Kale breathed, awestruck. That's where the imbalance is coming from. Arathian nodded, gripping her weapon tightly. Let's finish this. As they approached the structure, a chilling realization dawned on them. They weren't alone. Figures materialized from the shadows, humanoid yet alien, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. These were the architects of the imbalance, beings who thrived on chaos and destruction. You dare trespass here? One of them hissed, its voice dripping with venom. This realm belongs to us. Arathian stepped forward, her stance unyielding. Not anymore. The battle that followed was unlike any they had fought before. The architects wielded powers that bent reality itself, forcing Arathian and Kale to adapt quickly or perish. Time slowed, gravity reversed, and space folded in on itself, creating illusions designed to disorient and terrify. Yet through it all, they fought as one. Arathian's combat prowess combined seamlessly with Kale's inventive tactics, allowing them to counter attacks that would have otherwise overwhelmed them. Each victory brought them closer to the crystalline structure, but also deeper into the architect's lair. As they neared the final confrontation, Kale glanced at Arathian, his expression resolute. Ready. She met his gaze, her glowing eyes filled with determination. Always. Side by side, they entered the structure, ready to face whatever awaited them inside. The fate of Zyrithia, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested on their shoulders. But for the first time, Arathian didn't feel the weight of it alone. Inside the crystalline structure, the air hummed with an otherworldly energy, vibrating through their very bones. The walls shimmered like liquid glass, reflecting distorted images of themselves, twisted versions that seemed to mock their resolve. At the heart of the chamber stood a massive, pulsating core, its surface etched with intricate patterns that shifted and writhed as though alive. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a paradox that mirrored the cosmic forces it represented. Standing before the core were three towering figures, the leaders of the architects, their forms more solid and menacing than the others they had encountered. Their eyes burned with cold fury, and their voices echoed in unison, resonating through the chamber. You cannot undo what has been set into motion, one of them declared, its tone dripping with disdain. The imbalance feeds on chaos, and chaos is eternal. Arathian stepped forward, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. Not while I still draw breath. Kale moved beside her, his hands gripping a device he had hastily assembled from scavenged parts during their journey. We didn't come this far to back down now. The architects laughed, a sound so chilling it sent shivers down even Arathian's spine. Foolish mortals. Do you truly believe your feeble efforts can challenge the fabric of existence? We don't need to destroy you, Kale countered, his voice firm. We just need to stop you from destroying everything else. With that, he activated the device. A high-pitched whine filled the chamber as arcs of energy shot out, disrupting the architect's connection to the core. They staggered, momentarily weakened, but quickly recovered, their anger manifesting as tendrils of dark energy lashing out toward the pair. Arathian intercepted the attack, her blade slicing through the tendrils with precision honed over decades of battle. She fought with everything she had, her movements fluid yet fierce, buying Kale the time he needed to stabilize the device. Each strike brought her closer to exhaustion, but she refused to falter, not when so much depended on her. Meanwhile, Kale worked furiously, adjusting dials and rerouting power flows. Sweat dripped from his brow as he struggled to maintain focus amidst the chaos. His fingers trembled, but his determination never wavered. He knew failure wasn't an option, not for Arathian, not for Zyrithia, and not for himself. Finally, the device emitted a sharp beep, signaling its readiness. It's ready, Kale shouted above the din. Get clear. Arathian hesitated only for a moment before leaping back, trusting him implicitly. With a deep breath, Kale hurled the device directly at the core. It struck true, embedding itself within the pulsating mass. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the core erupted in a blinding flash of light, engulfing the entire chamber. The architects screamed in rage and agony as the imbalance feeding them began to unravel. One by one, their forms dissolved into nothingness, consumed by the very force they sought to control. When the light faded, silence reigned. The core no longer pulsed with chaotic energy. Instead, it glowed softly, radiating warmth and stability. The air felt lighter, cleaner, as though a great weight had been lifted from the universe itself. Arathian turned to Kale, her chest heaving from exertion. Did we do it? He nodded, a weary smile spreading across his face. Yeah, we did. For a moment, they simply stood there, staring at each other in disbelief. Then, without warning, Arathian pulled him into a tight embrace. Her arms wrapped around him, holding him as though afraid he might vanish if she let go. Kale returned the gesture, burying his face against her shoulder. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. Kale chuckled softly, pulling back just enough to look at her. Don't thank me yet. You're stuck with me now, remember. Her lips curved into a rare smile, one that reached her glowing eyes. I wouldn't have it any other way. Their return to Zyrithia was met with jubilation. The planet, once teetering on the brink of collapse, now thrived under renewed vitality. Cracks in the crystalline forests sealed themselves, rivers of light flowed freely again, and the tremors ceased entirely. The people celebrated their warrior princess and the human who had saved them all, though few understood the depth of the bond they shared. In the weeks that followed, Arathian found herself changing, not just in how she led her people, but in how she viewed herself. She no longer saw strength solely as a measure of physical prowess or unwavering resolve. Instead, she embraced vulnerability, recognizing it as a source of power rather than weakness. And she allowed herself to love, not just Kale, but her world and everyone in it. Kale, too, had transformed. No longer the fragile outsider struggling to adapt, he had become a vital part of Zyrithian society. His ingenuity earned him respect among the engineers and scientists, while his kindness endeared him to the common folk. Together, he and Arathian worked to forge a brighter future for their people, blending the best of both their worlds. One evening, as they stood together beneath the twin suns, watching the horizon glow with hues of violet and gold, Kale turned to her with a mischievous grin. You know, I never got a proper answer to my question. She raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. What question? Why you call me beautiful, he said, his tone teasing. You've avoided it long enough. Arathian smiled, reaching up to cup his cheek. Because you are, she replied simply. Not because of your appearance, but because of who you are. Because you see beauty where others see flaws. Because you make me want to be better. Because you're mine. Cale's grin widened, and he leaned down to kiss her, sealing the moment with a promise neither of them would ever break. As they stood there, hand in hand, surrounded by the wonders of Xyrithia, they knew their journey was far from over. But whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as equals, as partners, and as two souls bound by love and trust. And in that unity, they found their happily ever after.